Today's Daf Yomi is Kesubos, Daf Ches, Kesubos 8. So we're going to start on the very bottom of Zayin Bay's 2 lines from the bottom on 7b. Tana Rabbanan, Mevarchen Berchas Chasanim Ba'asara Kol Sheva, that you make a blessing for the Chasanim, i.e., this is what we colloquially call Sheva Brachos today, the 7 blessings, even though the Talmud only discusses 6. And the Talmud doesn't discuss the Bori Priya Gafen. Here it's a whole separate question why certain berachos of mitzvah, why certain mitzvah blessings have a blessing over wine associated with them and others don't. But the Gemara does not discuss in this topic why we have the blessing of wine associated with it. We call it Sheva Brachos, but it's really 6 blessings. So you say the Berachas Chasanim with a minion of 10 for all 7 days. And Amar Rav Yehuda, V'hu Panem Chadashos. Rav Yehuda says that says you only recite these blessings as long as there were Panem Chadashos. There were new people. Rashi says B'kol Yom Shelo Hayasham Esmol, that they weren't there yesterday, which is also interesting because what about if they were there the day before? Rashi doesn't directly address that question. If they were there 2 days ago, can they still count as Panim Chadashos for today? Or does it mean they had to have not been there at all for the chuppah? And furthermore, we state, Tosfos says, Panim Chadashos can't be just that you weren't there at the wedding. It means that you have to add some kind of simcha, some kind of joy to the festivities by your presence, that you're somebody distinguished. What's the blessing that you make? Amar Rav Yehuda, Baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam, she'akol bara l'chodo, that everything was created in the glory of God. Everything that was created for God's glory. We're on top of Chasam and Aleph, and Rashi explains that this is not really a separate blessing. This is not a blessing at all connected to the bride and the groom. This is just a blessing about the greatness of God, which we say every time we have a large gathering, when we have a gathering of people. So is an nafkamina. Let's say for some reason the Sar Kedushin accidentally said this blessing prior to the Sheva Brachos. So should it be repeated now? Anyway, that's a question that comes up. And V'yotzer Adam. What the second blessing is the blessing called Yotzer Adam. This is about the creation of man. This is not about man and woman. That's only by the third blessing. But here it's just about the creation of man. Then we come to the next blessing, which is Vasher Yotzar Asa Adam B'Tzalmo B'Tzelm Mustavniso V'Hiskin Lomimeno Benyada De'ad Baruch Atah Hashem Yotzer Adam. And this Rashi explains that the blessing of Adam and Eve, that Eve was created from the Tzelem of B'Tzelm Mustavniso V'Hiskin Lomimeno, that from Adam was created a Binyana De'ad, and a binyan that will last, and that is Eve, because she was created from the tzela of Adam. And that then we come up to the fourth blessing, which is the blessing about Yerushalayim, because Rashi says we have to put Yerushalayim on top of all our moments of joy. We have to remember the destruction of Yerushalayim. It says, Sos tasis v'sagel akara, rejoice, O power one. B'kubutz banel esocha b'simcha, when your children are gathered into you with joy. Baruch atah Hashem misameach tzion bevanea, that Zion rejoices with her children. The fifth blessing is Sameach Tesamach Re'im Ha'ovim. Rejoice, friends who are lovers, Kesamech Chayitzircha, like you were rejoicing when you were created, Began Eden Mikedem, in the ancient Garden of Eden. Baruch atah Hashem Sameach Chasam V'Chawa. Blessed are you, the bride and the groom. And here Rashi points out that the next blessing is Sameach Chasan Imakawa, the blessing the groom with the bride. But this one is the bride and the groom, because here we're not blessing them as a married couple, we're giving them individual blessings. But then we come to the last blessing, the sixth blessing. God who creates Sason and Simcha Chasan and Kala bride and groom, Giwa, Rina, Aditza, these are all expressions of joy, Ava, V'achva, V'shalom, V'reus, of love and friendship. Mehera Hashem Alkeinu Yishama Bare Yehuda, may it soon be heard in the cities of Judah, L'chutzos Yerushalayim, and in the courtyards of Jerusalem, Kol Sasam and Kol Simcha, Kol Chasam and Kol Kala, the sound of rejoicing, sound of happiness, the sound of the Chasan and the Kala, Kol Mitzalas Chasana Mechupasam, the sound of rejoicing as the groom goes out of his chuppah v'na'ar mishten v'kinasam, and the youth from their parties. Baruch atah Hashem misameach chasan im akala. Blessed are you, God, who causes the chasan to rejoice with the bride. Levi ikol Rabbi Behilulia, the Rabbi Shimon Berei. Levi came to the house of Rabbi at the wedding feast of Rabbi Shimon, his son. Baruch Chamesh, he made 5 blessings. Rav Asi ikol Rabbi Rav Ashi Behilulia Demar Berei. Rav Asi came to the house of Rav Ashi at the wedding of his son, and Baruch Shis, and he said 6 blessings. So the one who says 5 blessings, Rashi says, he's skipping Yotzer Adam, which is because, and we'll see why he's skipping the second blessing, which is about the creation of just Adam. We'll see why. What's the nature of this dispute? Why does one say you say that Yotzer Adam, the other one says you don't? So one is in the position that there was one creation. What does that mean, that there was one creation? So Rashi says it means that Adam was created as one, and then from Adam came Eve. So first it was created as one. And then whereas the one who says, you say Yotzer Adam, we'll look at what Rashi says here. Rashi says, "Shtei Yitziros command Amar Zanavaya, that Adam had a tail, Mimenu Nivrasa Isha, and that from this tail, Eve was created. So therefore, there's 2 Yitziros. And one who says that there was one creation, command Amar Be'erevin Vayiven Esatzela Partsuf. That at the beginning of creation, that Adam and Eve were created with 2 faces, of a male face in the front and the female face in the back. So the one who says that there was one creation, it was that they were created as one entity. There were the 2 faces on this being, that Adam and Eve were created as one entity, whereas according to one who says that there were 2 creations, Eve came from the tail of Adam. So according to the one who says that they were 2 entities, we would say Yotzer Adam, according to this approach, because that Adam was first created. But according to say it was one entity, then you wouldn't say the blessing of Yotzer Adam. Tosfos says it's the exact opposite. Tosfos says that we say just the opposite. So that's that's the position of the Rashbam. Anyway, so that's perhaps the logic behind whether or not we say Yotzer Adam. So the Tosfos says no. Everybody says it was one creation. That there was one creation. Everybody's of that position. He created, according to Rashi, with one face, the 2 faces and one body. But Mar Savar Basar Machshava Azlinon Bar Savar Basar Maisa Azlinon. One says we follow the initial intent, that at first God intended to create 2, and they were created as one. And so therefore they say, since that was the machshava, we say Yotzer Adam. One says we say no Basar Maisa. Then in the end, since everybody says that it was one creation, and since it was created as one, then we wouldn't say Yotzer Adam, because they were men and women created together. So what's the idea behind this? That if God wanted to create 2, why did he start off creating them as one and then separating them? The concept is that the husband and wife, really, they're reconnecting to an early soul, and that's the concept there. So the Gemara says, Kihad Rav Yehuda Ramik Sev. Rav Yehuda threw 2 verses against each other. One verse states, one verse says God created man in his image, and another verse says Zachar and Nekeva Baram, male and female, he created them. So how could that be? Al Ketzad. At first, God intended to create 2. In the end, they were created as one entity. Rav Ashi Ikra Lebei Rav Kahana. So Rav Ashi came to the house of Rav Kahana. Yoma Kama Baruch Kul. That first day, they said all 6 blessings. Mekam Ve'elach. From that point on, Ika Panam Chadashos Baruch Kul. That if there are new faces, he would recite all the blessings. V'ilo, if there are no new faces, It's just an increase in joy. And so therefore it's not a new party, it's just increase of joy from the wedding. You wouldn't make those all 6 blessings. So instead, what would you say? You would say that before you do the Birkat Hamazon, you do a Zimun, you say, blessed is the one who has the simcha, the joy from his abode. And then you would say one of the 6 blessings, Asher Bara, just the blessing, what we call the last blessing, which is Asher Bara Sasam Simcha. From 7 days until 30 days, whether you invited people to the party because here's the bride and groom, so let's celebrate them. Or let's say the bride and groom just happened to be there, but everybody there wasn't invited. Excuse me, on account of the bride and the groom. Then you would just say Mevarach Shasimcha b'ma'ono. You would still say Shasimcha b'ma'ono. From that point on, after 30 days, if you invite them for the bride and groom, the Shana Rishona, the first year of the marriage, you would say always Shasimcha b'ma'ono as long as the bride and groom are present. If you invited people to be part of the bride and groom's joy, but if it wasn't part of the bride and groom's joy, you wouldn't say it. Gemara says, so let's say you invite somebody to celebrate with the bride and groom. Until how long? That can't be forever. So the Gemara says, you have a 12 months. Gemara says, Umeikara me'imas, and at what point meikara me'imas? And so how much prior to the wedding? From what before the wedding started? If you invite people over for the bride and groom, like during the engagement process, at what point do you start saying Shasimcha b'ma'ono? So Amar Papa Ramu Si'ir Sa'arein Ba'asinta, from when you would put the barley in the water to turn into beer. An alternative answer Rashi gives the second answer is he used to plant special plants that were signs of fertility and barley seeds for the bride and the groom. And is it really the case of Papa Yasek Abba Marbury? But Rav Papa was once involved. He went to the wedding of Abba Marbury, Ubarech Mishas Erusin, and there he was preparing the wedding for his daughter to Abba Marbury, and there they made the blessing from the time of the betrothal. They said Shasimcha b'ma'ono. So that's much earlier. So Gemara says, no, Shani Rav Papa is different to Ave Tarachwe, because they started preparing for his wedding. He's a very wealthy man. They started preparing from the engagement. Ravina Yasekwe Lebrei Be Rav Chavive. Ravina, he made a shidduch with the Brei Be Rav Chaviva. Ubarach Mishas Erison. And he also did a betrothal from the time of he also started making the Simcha b'ma'ono from the time of the betrothal. Amar, he said, Kimle begavaihu to lo hadrebu, because he says, I know this marriage is for sure going to last. This engagement is not going to break up. Guess what? It's stay milsa v'hadrebu. Yeah, something happened and the engagement broke off. Rav Tachlifa bar Marava ikol Babel Baruch Shis Arichta. Rav Tachlifa bar Marava, he came to Babylon and he made 6 long blessings. Rashi says he just added in. He added in words. Sometimes you go to a prayer service and people just add in words. And he also concluded with a blessing. And we said, don't do that. Rav Chaviva Ikol Abein Mahula, Rav Ikol came to a bris. Baruch Shasimcha b'ma'ono. He said Shasimcha b'ma'ono at a bris. But the law is not like that. Mishum Detride. Because the parents are upset. They're upset because the child is in distress, and so therefore the parents are not a complete joy either. When we count these 10 to make the blessing, we could count the groom as well. But we don't count the mourners. Well, we're going to see why are we making the blessings for the mourners? What's the mourners blessing about? We'll see why. Anyway, first of all, we contradict Rav. We say we have a brayso which says the groom and the mourners are in the minyan. Gemara said, Masnisa Karamasoy the Rav, you're raising a question on Rav from a brisa. Is that what your question is? Rav Tanu Rav is crossover generation. He was the last of the Tanaim and the first of the Amoraim, so he has the ability to argue with the brisa. So the Gemara says, but we have a different source that says, like Rav, and this was Rav Yochanan, he says that the groom is part of the minyan, but not the mourner. So we'll ask the question of Rav Yochanan. Rav Yochanan, we don't say Tanahu Palig. But we have the contradictory source of Rav Yochanan, because it says the Chasanim and the mourners are part of the minyan. So the Gemara says, so this idea that the mourners are part of the minyan is only with respect to combine him for a zimun, because there we say the mourner also has to recite zimun because he's part. Mourner is liable to do all the mitzvahs except for tefillin on the first day. So we see from here, and that's when he says the mourners are part of the minyan. Kikama Rabbi Yochanan, when Rabbi Yochanan says the mourners are not part of the minyan, that's bishura. That's when they would come back from the grave, they would make a line and make a row around the mourner to comfort him, and they would sit him down and they would stand around him. And the Gemara in Sanhedrin says that you only do this ritual ceremony called this shura if you have 10. If you don't have 10, you don't do the shura. So it's similar. We make a shura, 2 rows facing each other when people leave Halavaya. So there he's saying, so Rabbi Yochanan is saying you only do this shura when you have a minyan. Gemara says, what are you talking about? Chasana min minyan, uberchas avelim ba'asara, ve'ein avelim min minyan. So let's go back to what Rabbi Yochanan said. Rabbi Yochanan said you make the blessing of the avelim, but the avelim are not part of the minyan. You need 10, and they're not part of the minyan. Ubeshura, bracha b'shura mi'ika. There's no blessing by the shura, by the Israel. You're just standing there and comforting him. There's no blessing. We today have the practice of saying makom yinachem, but that's not a blessing. So elakika amar Rabbi Yochanan berachava. So when Rabbi Yochanan said that you make the berachas avelim with 10 and the avelim are not part of the minyan, that refers to not to shura, but to the rachava. This is the practice that we have a modified version of, and that is we do a sudas havara, which is the first meal when the mourner comes back. Rashi says this was the antecedent of that. Rashi says, and when you give the mourner the first meal, which comes from other people, like we said in Moikatan, they would give him the meal in the street, and they would make the blessing over the mourners, as we're going to see. So that is where Rabbi Yochanan says the mourners are not counted as part of the minyan. וחסנה מן המניין, וברכס אביהם בעשרה כל שבע, ואין אביהם מן המניין, ברכס רחבה כל שבע מאיקה. So the Gemara says, okay, but Rabbi Yochanan says that, what was Rabbi Yochanan's statement? That you don't make the blessing of the mourners, don't count for the blessing of the mourners, but you make this blessing for all 7 days. Well, if this blessing for the mourners in the Rachava, in the street, that's only when they come back from the funeral. It's not for all 7 days. Gemara says, no. If new people would come to the Shiva, to visit the Shiva, then they would then add these blessings, which, by the way, we don't say today anyway. Because Rav Chiya bar Abba, he taught Tanakh to the children of Rish Lakish. Some say Masne Berei Rish Lakish. Some say he taught Rish Lakish's children Braisos or Mishnayos. Shachav Yanuka, Rahman al-Tzlan, his baby died. Yom HaKamal lo Azol Gabi. So the first day Rish Lakish shouldn't go to see him. Machar the next day, Dabrei Yehuda bar Nachmani, he brought his Meturgamayne, he brought his interlocutor, his translator, the one who gave the speeches on his behalf, Yehuda bar Nachmani. He brought him to the Shiva. Amalei kum ema milsa, kol kabil Yenuka. He said, get up in front of Rav Chiya bar Abba and say something about this terrible event that occurred. Say words of nichumim, words of comfort for the death of this baby. So Pasach v'Yamar. So Yehuda Bar Nachmani said, he started saying, it says Vayar Hashem Vayanatz Mikas Panavu B'nosav. So it says Hashem saw and was angered, and he was disgusted. Mikas, he had tremendous anger on his sons and his daughters. And so says Yehuda Bar Nachmani, Dor Sha'avos Menatzim HaKadosh Baruch Hu Kois Al B'neim V'B'noseim U'Meisim Kishem Ketanim. He says a generation where the fathers anger God, God is going to get angry on their sons and daughters, and they will die when they are young. So it's because the generation got sin before God. The alternative version of this is Bacharhu, is that Reb Bar Abba's son who died was a Bachar, it was a young man. He says, and this is what Yehuda Bar Nachmani Yehuda Bar Nachmani said. He says in the verse, so it says in Isaiah chapter 9, on his youth, God will not be happy, and the orphans and his widows will not have mercy. Because all of them are flattering and wicked. The kolped dover nivala, and every mouth speaks licentiousness. With all this, God is patience. God's anger has not been abated, and his hand is still stretched out. What does that mean? It means everybody knows why the bride goes to the wedding. Whoever is vulgar about this and it's explicit, even if he has a decree of 70 years for good, he's going to be able to turn this decree from good to bad. So the Gemara says that basically he was saying, your children died, your son died because you were manuval, because you spoke disgusting. So the Gemara says, also in Achume, it's Uri Kamatzarwe. Reish Lakish and Yehuda Bar Nachmani came to comfort him. They were distressing him. So Hachi Kamarwe, Chashiv Atvat Futse Adori, saying not that you, God forbid, Rabbi Bar Abba, he didn't do these things, but because people in the generation did it, you're so important that you're being punished for the sins of your generation. So Reish Lakish says, say something about the praise of God. Pasach v'Yamar Akel Gadol Barov Gadlo Adir v'Chazak Barov Neraos Machayim Mesim B'Mamaros Ekdos Adin Chekim V'Nefos Adin Mitzvah Brachat Hashem Machayim Mesim. That God does tremendous miracles without limit. Plus, you God who resurrects the dead. Amalei Kumeim Milsa Keneged Aveim. He says something about the mourners. Pasach v'Yamar. So Yehuda Bar Nachmani said, Achenu Amiyudayim Amaduchayim. Our brothers who are weary with this morning, give them the strength to investigate this. This idea of death is standing forever. It's from the 6 days of creation. Rabim Shatu, Rabim Yishtu. Many have drank, i.e., many have died, and many will drink. Many will die. Like the earlier ones drank, so too will the later ones. Let our brothers, master of comforts, comfort you. You are the one who is comforted. Blessed is the one who comforts the mourner. So Amar Abaye says, I don't understand why he said this. Rabim Shatu. Why he says many died. Lema, but Rabim Yishtu Lema, that many will die. You shouldn't say. Mishta Rishonim Lema. He didn't say that many people have drunk from this potion of death. But Mishta Achronim Lema. But he shouldn't say that many will die. Person shouldn't tempt Satan, shouldn't tempt fate. Amar Yosef Mikra, what's the verse it says? In Isaiah it says, Kistoma Yinu Amora Dimina. They said we were like Sodom and we were like Amora. Maya Hadore. And what was the next verse? Shemud Var Hashem. Listen to the word of God. Katsine Sodom, you officers of Sodom. So I'm like, so Yerushalayim said, say something about those who comfort the mourners. Pasach Yamar, Achenu Gomer Chasadim, Bnei Gomer Chasadim, Mechazkim Bebriso Shel Avram Avinu. It says, our brothers who are Gomer Chasad, they give off kindness, the children of those who give off kindness, Machzikim Bebriso Shel Avram Avinu, to uphold the covenant of Abraham. Achenu Bala Gamul, Yerushalayim Lachem K'mochem. Our brothers, master, the master of kindness, at Bala Gamul, at the one who's the master of kindness, Yishalem Lachem K'mochem, pay you back for your tremendous kindness. Baruch atah Hashem Yishalem Lachem. Amalei says, Kum Ema Milsa Keneged Kol Yisrael. He says, so Yerushalayim says, say something about all the Jewish people. Pasach Amar Ribona Olamim, Master of the universe, Padeva Atzia Maret, Hoshea Amcha Yisrael Min Adeva. Save the Jewish people from the plague. From the sword and the plunder. These are other massive natural catastrophes. And all their punishments and misrakshos that appear before us. Before you are called, before we call out, you will be answered. Blessed are you, the one who stops the plague. So Ura said, and some say it was taught in a brisa, that there were 10 cups of wine that the sages instituted in a house of mourning. And Rashi says we want to give a lot of drink. It says give the yayin l'mari nefesh, give wine to the one who's the bitter soul. So 10 cups were instituted based on shlosha kodem achila, 3 of them prior to eating, to whet his appetite. Shlosha b'toch achila, another 3 in the middle of the meal, so that the food gets digested properly. And 4 after eating, echad keneged hazan, echad keneged berchas haaretz, echad keneged boner Yerushalayim, echad keneged atov hamitiv, corresponding to all the 4 blessings of Birkat HaMazon. For each blessing, he drinks a cup of wine, Rashi says, and then they pour him another cup of wine. And they added on another 4 blessings. They made one for the people who serve the city, because they get involved like the Chevra Kadisha. They care for the needs of the community. They were very wealthy, and they spend their money to bury the poor. The Echad Keneged Beis HaMikdash, one corresponding to the temple. They made a blessing for that God should rebuild the temple, because we're in mourning for the destruction of the temple. And Echad Keneged Rabbi Gamliel, and one corresponding to Rabbi Gamliel. We'll see why in a moment. And you showed to the Mishnachim, but then everybody was getting drunk. You can imagine why. It's already up to 14 cups. They put it back to what it originally was. They only drink 10 cups of wine. What did Rabbi Gamliel do? At first, the taking out of the dead bodies for a funeral was even more difficult than their death. Meaning to say, for the relatives to have to bury them, the cost of the burial expenses was even more upsetting than the death itself. And until they would just leave the bodies in the street and run away. Rabbi Gamliel acted with great humility. He said, bury me in linen garments. Everybody started doing it with linen garments. He said, nowadays people get buried in a canvas. She says canvas that's only worth a dinar. It's only worth a dinar. Okay, we'll stop here. And God willing, we'll repeat.